Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Straight Outta BS podcast. Thank you guys so much for the continued support. I really appreciate it. Thank you to my Patreon members. Thank you to my listener support. Thank you to the people that have joined my YouTube channel. I really appreciate it. And it's never expected, so it's always appreciated. Thank you guys for sharing the videos, liking them, commenting. Anything that interacts with the video helps the algorithm, so just really appreciate it. And let's keep on doing that. I want to do a moment of silence for the person still struggling with intrusive thoughts or addiction or anything like that. So on the count of 3, I'm going to do a moment of silence. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you for that. And without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce my guest for the day. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Jeric, your canon.
Okay, and go ahead and you said you want to just tell your story.
Yeah, I grew up in a Christian home. My mom became a Christian in the 70s, and she read the Bible, went to prayer meetings and Bible study and all that stuff. And she had a rough upbringing. Her parents were not religious, but on her deathbed, she died in 2018, and she was married to my dad 50 years. Well, my dad passed away 2 years after she did. She was kind of confessing to my wife, I was not there at the time, how her mother, which is my grandmother, she died in 2008, my grandmother, at age 90. And she was not a very good grandmother and was not a very good mother, as I've learned. And my mom was crying like 2 months before she passed, and we knew she was going to pass, but she had cancer. And she was in a nursing home, and she was sharing how she needed help sometimes. Was I'm one of 11 kids. The oldest sibling of mine is about 57 years old, and the youngest is 34. I'm age 40, and I have a twin sister. So there was times my mom needed help with us, or one time I think somebody had some soup needed someone to bring it up to the house. But I remember my mom was sharing that with my wife, because she shared it with me later on, and that her mother wanted to help her and stuff like that, but she just got a new car, and it kind of hurt her feelings, I guess. So her mother wasn't very supportive, and it was a chaotic household, and most of her family was Catholic religion, but they didn't go to church. They went for funerals and weddings. So as I learned later, is that she experienced a lot of trauma. And I've learned that her mom actually didn't really want her. Like as a child, I guess she had, I think she had 2 brothers, older brothers, and then a sister that I think she was younger. We weren't very close to his aunt. And her mom would send her over to her grandmother's house now whenever she was out of school and different things. And my mom didn't even graduate high school. And when she turned like 18, 19, she started dating my dad. And eventually, age 20, I think it was, she had her first, was it 20? Might have been 19. She had her first kid, which was my brother. And that's 1967. And so that was pretty interesting. And so, yeah, she experienced a lot of trauma. And I think some people, they find religion to comfort them, right? And to help them cope. And if you've gone through trauma, not even religious trauma, that's another story, but trauma, you attach yourself to religion. And then when you start reading a religious book, it starts becoming toxic, and you start nitpicking certain things in there. And then after a while, my mom, I learned later, and where I am now, she was right about a lot of things. How religion is used to make money, how religion is used to almost control people, and there's a lot of people in ministry who are more interested in money and power and stuff. And even the government was no good. And she always said she didn't trust, but she believed in conspiracy theories. Like she would follow Bill Cooper in the 1990s, and he was a
Yep.
big conspiracy theorist. And then it was Alex Jones, and the world was going to end. She got caught up with that, and I'm going to share that in the story where that comes into the picture. But I think it was a couple weeks ago. It just came to my mind. Why don't I research some of these names like Bill Cooper, Alex Jones, and again, my mom passed away in 2018, and you learn that they made a lot of money off these conspiracy theories, things they're sharing, and different things. Or Alex Jones said the Connecticut shooting did not help, the school shooting didn't happen.
Yeah.
Well, all
Yeah.
you had
Yeah.
all you had to do is travel up there and check the school out to see.
Exactly.
Yeah, and what's even interesting is my wife's brother's best friend is a oh, pathologist. I forget the name, where you study and you examine dead bodies. And
Yeah.
she did that. She lives in New York. She used to be from my area, and yeah, and people believe these people, and he made millions of dollars off his conspiracy theories or whatever. And the way I approach this is, it's not that anything is possible. There is a lot of corrupt people out there. There is some things that could be true, but you can't hold anything to be true until you have actually evidence to prove that it's true, reliable evidence, physical evidence, and anything else, and deep research. Other words, it's just an opinion, and most likely not fact. So there's a lot of things that we could use example as um the what was it the virus or whatever, coronavirus or whatever, 2000. There's a possibility that China could have released it. But do I have the evidence? Did I go over there? Did I really do deep research? No. So it's not crazy thoughts, but you can't say that's what happened because we don't have the facts and we don't have the evidence to claim it to be fact. Otherwise, it's conspiracy theory. So, but these people made a lot of money off that, and so my mom followed it. She believed the world was coming to an end, and I might just share this because it's in the story. And I remember in the 1990s, and I think it might have been the 1980s, my parents would stock up on food and out under the ground basement. We lived in the country, and near Clifford, Pennsylvania, and she would have rice, beans, all that stocked up in case the end of the world came and Jesus would return or the tribulation and all that stuff. For me, that was traumatizing. Um, because I was like fifth, sixth grade, I remember talking to my twin sister and I was sharing with her that I hope I make it into high school before the Great Tribulation starts and all that stuff. And I wasn't sure if I was going to make it in high school. I believed it. Later on, I think it was like a couple weeks ago, I mentioned it to my younger sister, if she believed stuff, and she goes, "You really believe that stuff?" I'm like, "Yeah." And I've learned that every one of my siblings, one out of 11, some of them still hold on to Christian faith, but I learned that everybody has their own story. Some people might not have took it literal, some people did. And I was one of the people that I think I trusted my mom. So, yeah, so I just learned that my mom gone through a lot. And I think religion and Christianity made her feel comfortable, helped her cope through life. And it made sense to her because she's seen a lot of evil, I guess, and had a lot of hurt. So she's seen things through that hurt and that perspective. And it just became poison. And so, yeah, I'm going to start off with my story now. Yeah, I remember when I was like 55, 6 years old, I our cat one time was sick, a dog was sick, and I prayed for an hour or two to get better, and they never did. They died. That's the first time and last time I ever would pray for a cat.
Yeah.
And I remember one time I was in the hospital, and my mom shared this with me later on, many years later, that I used to put on Jimmy Swaggart. I stayed for a couple of days. I was like maybe 5, 6, 7 years old. And he's a pastor. I don't know if you know Jimmy Swaggart. And the nurse would come in and change the channel. As she go out, I put it back on, and the nurse assumed that my mom thinks it was her changing the channel. So I used to like Jimmy Swaggart. Minus the prostitute he was sleeping with in 1989.
Yeah.
So so I was obviously influenced by Christianity at a young age, and eventually, when I was like I think 8 years old, I stopped caring about Christianity and God, and my mom never understood why. I thought about this like within the past year. It's very possible Jimmy Swaggart, I think he came off the TV, and I just had no interest. So thank God for that.
Yeah.
um. So yeah, and also I remember I was in 6th grade. This was traumatizing. As a 6th grader, I stole money from my dad, and I remember him yelling at me because he figured out it was me. And he was saying that all liars are going to hell,
Mm-hmm.
and all thieves are going to hell. Well, since I was in 3rd grade, some reason I had a deep fear of death and depressed, and I don't know where that came from, and I still did up to maybe a year ago, and so yeah, that was very traumatizing until I was 6th grader. That just because he stole money.
Yeah. Well, also, if you take the Bible literally, you're born in sin.
Yeah, exactly.
You're literally born. The second you're born, you're already a sinner. So,
Mhm.
I mean, it's really poisonous, in my opinion. In my
Yeah, it
opinion, it's
is.
poisonous. Yeah.
It is, and then I've learned later over the past year that there's over 1,000 laws and commands within the New Testament alone, and then you can really start to tear things apart. And then going off a little bit topic here, but I've learned today as I did more research, as like people who claim to be a Christian, especially they think they're following this Jesus. When you look at the modern day church, and it's been like this probably past 1,800 years or so, so I did my little research, they actually follow Apostle Paul. And many scholars actually, there's one James Tabor, he's a religious scholar. I listened to him on his podcast and YouTube, and he's an expert in this area and was doing this for like 30, 40 years. He was a teacher at a university. Um, and Apostle Paul actually created Christianity. That's what people don't realize. And I started thinking about that today. It was something new. And I started Googling a lot today and looking back. I already knew some stuff already. Because a lot of things Apostle Paul was saying that literally contradicted what Christians claim to follow Jesus in the Gospels. If people believe that, there's so many things like that Jesus said. Like Jesus, if you actually learn, if actually people believe that, um, he was about works. He was about helping the poor. He was for the oppressed. He was there to set people free. He was about visiting the prisoner. He was about helping the sick, loving your neighbor as yourself. And there was a lot of good things we could
Yep.
apply to our life that could make us a better person, not judge. I think Matthew 7, I thought about that today. They said don't judge because you have a log in your eye. How are you going to judge? And my theory is if somebody's hurting somebody, like say you're lying a lot to somebody and hurting them, if you're stealing from somebody, deceiving somebody, murdering somebody, then you should say something because you're hurting people, right? They're hurting somebody. So yeah, so Paul created Christianity, and then this Jesus character, actually, it wasn't for religion. It was just about him, period, and being a good person, just about. And it's just crazy because the modern day church is obsessed with Apostle Paul,
Yeah.
almost against homosexuality, and they think things say this, but there's um, hope you don't mind, I'm ranting a little.
You're okay.
Um, and this is very educational to some people, position they are in their life and their beliefs. There's so many other sins Paul condemns, but in the American church, it's usually sexual sins are the worst. But yeah, you go back to the Old Testament, and this became more than my story, isn't it? It says abomination, lying is abomination. So how many pastors I know and known as Thursday lie to get money from people, make up stuff. So there's like an uneven balance when they say all sin's the same, which is not treated the same.
Exactly.
So this is just stuff I've learned over the past year, and it was very helpful and gave me peace, because I'm sure there's people that come on your podcast here who are Christians, who have been hurt, who's been traumatized, and still have that faith, and they don't know what to do with it because they're seeing things through the lenses of their hurt, or through the boarding school, where it's just poison. Because most boarding schools, as you bring a lot of guests on here, it's poison Christianity. It's almost Apostle Paul Christianity. Whereas, about don't do this, don't do that, all the law. Because at the same time, Apostle Paul says we're not under the law. He gives a lot of commands. It's like dress this way, do this, don't talk with unbelievers, don't be unequally yoked, or men be ahead of the house, do this, do that. So it's a very controlling Christianity he brings on, and then you go back to what Christ said. It was totally different. The things he said, he was against the religious leaders. He was against people who threw the law at people. Or I'm really preaching now, man. And it's helpful. He was against people who like use the law to like put heavy burdens on people, and that's like the modern day church, right, in America. And they do it to make themselves seem righteous. So, not off topic, but I'm glad I could share that.
Yeah.
But because it comes back to my story too. So yeah, it's just so interesting how much hurt the people went through. I watched a couple of your podcasts through Christian boarding schools, which nowhere represents the Christ they claim to follow. They don't follow this Christ, because they follow Apostle Paul.
Well, what it is it's a scapegoat for them to abuse people, because they can be like, "Oh, we're religious, so we'd never do that." You know what I mean? When behind closed doors, they're beating kids and doing all this faulty shit. So
people use religion all the time to get wealth and money. Politics do it. The most con men is in religion, in America mostly, because all the other countries actually is getting rid of these people. Some of these countries, some of these even hate preachers, like I think it's Stephen Anderson, Independent Baptist Church pastor in Arizona. He was banned from like 30 some countries. He thinks homosexuals should be killed, blah blah blah. America welcomes him, but he's in America, but he's okay to do what he wants and say what he wants, even if it's hurtful.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Some of these people you want to punch in the face.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I'm just glad to share that. So I'll continue on with my story, and hope what I share is very helpful to anyone who's watching this podcast and is seeking for the healthy belief system of Christianity, the Christ Center, the real Christ Center. If you still have that faith in Christianity, it's in the Gospels, not Paul. And then I've learned how the Bible was put together too. And all that stuff. It's just crazy. It's just a way to control people. And I think if there was a Jesus, it was just supposed to be Jesus alone, and supposedly what he said in the Gospels, that could be alone. Nothing else was needed if there was. So, but yeah, so that's that. So yeah, I remember when I got in high school, I didn't know if I would graduate, right? I didn't take high school very serious because as far as I was concerned, there's a possibility of great tribulation happening and Jesus returning. So for me, it's like, why should I study? And my parents didn't encourage studying because their view was the public school was no good, college was no good, they're brainwashing people, and you don't need school education. That's what their Christian views were mostly. Even though there's three of my older brothers that are very successful, not because of my parents, it's just they went to college on their own and kind of helped each other. But so I didn't take high school serious. I didn't really study. Plus, there was a lot of was a drama, and it was a bad environment I grew up under with the toxic Christianity, where my dad was, and the environment that affected me too. So definitely shaped me. So, but yeah, I'm like, why study? Why this? And waste your time? Just have fun. You know, that's what I did. Anytime, and then you learn. You start to focus on, oh, Jesus could return, or it could be in the world. And what I've learned, not within the past year, some people have those views because they're depressed. They have mental health issues, so they're putting their belief, hoping somebody comes and rescues them out of this world and their depression. And then if this doctrine and belief, and whatever you want to call it, theology, whatever, feeds into people's depression and low self-esteem and all that. And that's what I've noticed as well. And that's what it did with me. So then, so yeah, I was very depressed, low self-esteem in high school. I assumed I was the only one going through what I went through growing up. I assumed nobody else had problems as I did, and that nobody else was really Christians, which I've learned later on in public school. I've learned years later, after graduating, that there were some people that grew up in a Christian home or was growing up in a Christian home. They just didn't share it. And they went through a lot.
There's a lot of people actually like that. There's a lot of people actually like that. There's quite a few, yeah. But a lot of people don't talk about it.
No, they don't.
You know?
They don't, and that's why I have a podcast I do. That's why I have people come on there, share their stories, and either it's stirring the faith of Christianity and deconstructed the garbage, or they became atheists. It's because I think these stories need to be heard, and boarding school, people who are in boarding schools, it needs to be heard, and they need to get exposed, you know? Very important for people story to be heard, because then it gets out there. And then as it gets out there, the people are running these schools, now the information's out there so easily, hopefully it cuts down their business one way or another, hopefully.
I hope so.
So yeah, growing up, and as you see in modern day Christianity, sex is bad, right? Sex is the worst sin.
Yep.
They claim all sins the same, which I've learned over the past 2 years, learning, researching, that's not the message that gets across. It's mostly sexual sins. Don't sleep with your boyfriend or girlfriend before you're married. Don't live together because you're living in sin, and you're going to go straight to hell, which technically there's nowhere in freaking the Bible that says you're going to hell if you're living with your boyfriend or girlfriend.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's, you can't be gay, or you can't be homosexual. And where does that come from again? They claim it came from Apostle Paul because they nitpick some scriptures. And that's what they focus on. So I grew up in a home that my idea was sex was the worst. It was bad, you know, and yeah, as a teenager, yeah, you know, that affected you, traumatizing. I'm going to share later how that affected me, but I remember when I was like 7th, 8th grade, my parents just got cable. It was like 1996. My older brother bought it for them, and a TV and a computer. So I used to come down. I was a pervert, and I used to come down, turn on like Howard Stern or something in the middle of the night because I didn't have a TV in my room.
Yeah.
And watch dirty like girls or something, like girls, I don't know, naked, or movies. I was a pervert. That's like the only access, because I wasn't hanging out with girls, going over to their houses, wasn't allowed, and any of that. So, and then even one time I would go on and watch them porn on their computer, And my dad was on it, and porn ads started popping up, and they assumed it was me. I lied and said it wasn't me.
Mm-hmm.
So sex was bad. That affected me going into my early 20s. I wasn't even a Christian. I really didn't believe. I believed in a God, and maybe whatever my mom said might have been true. I was in the club scene, drinking and partying, and I would make out with girls. And between me being too drunk, anything, there's times I brought a girl home, tried to have sex, and I couldn't. Between being inexperienced and thinking, if I have sex, this is the worst. What if
Yes,
I
you're dealing,
died? Huh?
so you're kind of dealing with like a shame complex almost.
Yeah,
Like
I
you're
did. Yeah.
shameful. So
Hmm.
so it met. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah. And I wasn't even really a believer of the Bible or anything. I just believed in it, maybe God, and
Well,
maybe.
you were raised in that environment, so that's
Mhm.
why, even though you don't believe it, that was the environment you were raised in. So you have an inherent like internal shame when it comes to sex, which you shouldn't. Sex is
Mhm.
normal.
Mhm.
Sex is a part of normal life, you know. So
Mhm. Yeah, you're right. You know, and I remember way to have sex with this girl, and I died. I thought it was the worst. Died the next day. I might go to hell or something. Like, I didn't even believe in Christ,
yeah,
really. Like, but that's what I grew up under. That's the message I got. It's what was kind of drilled in me, that sex was the worst. It was a lot of combination, and it affected a lot of things when it came to a woman, and affected when going on dates. Even when I became a Christian on my own in 2008, I went on many dates, and I was arrogant. I was self-righteous, because technically you're thinking sex. This girl is hot, even Christian, if they're Christian or not Christian.
mm-hmm.
So there was one time, I didn't want to have. This girl was nice. We went on a second date. I went over her house, watched a movie. I said, "You have big lips," and she made a sexual. She was a nice girl. Comment like, "Oh, you know what I could do with them?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm not having sex with you." Left that apartment, and she never talked to me again. And really, it was a lot of, I feel bad, and I came off as a jerk and probably hurt a lot of these women. But now what I know, I learned about religious trauma. I took a course online in September. Um, it was done out of hurt. It was done out of combination and I don't know what the word to use, and guilt and things that was drilled in me, that I was just trying to protect myself because it was bad, and then it's the worst. Not married, and it's these sexual thoughts, or and it did more damage. As like, it's one thing to be in the bars, but I think I hurt more people. I think as a Christian, when I became a Christian on my own, because I went on a lot more dates and more confident and all that. When I was a Christian, it made me actually a worse human being, you
Mm.
know. And I hurt Christians. I went on dates with Christians, and one girl told me I was arrogant and a jerk off, and I asked her why she stopped talking to me, and I was. I'm sure that was part of my personality, but again, there's a lot of hurt. Then I'm going to throw the word fear and shame,
Mm-hmm.
are in me, and all that, in your mind, or whatever you want to call it, um, is why I said and did the things I did. You're really just trying to. It's almost. I think it's the survival mode, whatever that word.
Self-preservation.
Yeah,
Self-preservation. Yep.
yeah. So yeah, I was very traumatized, and I didn't have a lot of emotion. Like, I had emotions, but I wasn't very sympathetic at all to people. I cared. I said I cared about. I did somewhat, but I really didn't know how to show it.
Mm-hmm.
I never really. My mom, my dad never said I loved you. They never cuddled.
That,
Like, they never hugged us.
that's where that comes from. That's where that comes from. It's
Yeah.
your environment again.
Hmm.
It's you were raised in. Yep.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I'm doing the opposite with my son 10 times a day. He's 5 years old, me and my wife. Always telling him we love him, and hugging him. Even when he's a brat, I'm learning to get harder on him because he knows better now, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But yeah, that never came from, you knew they loved you. They never said it. And I've learned my dad's cousins were the same way. So, you know, So yeah, there was a lot of things stored up, a lot of hurt, insecurities, a lot of fears, a lot of shame, a lot of everything as I'm going on these dates. And then I met my wife at one point in 2014. We went on a date. She was different and she was caring, and I just knew she was different. She just was real, and you know, and we started dating, and she was like very sensitive, opposite than what I was. So I heard her a lot first, probably could have been 8 years. It wasn't until I really kind of left Christianity a year ago we started getting better at things. I did, and I still might believe in Christ if it's true. There's no evidence. Maybe the gospel society today, but not Christianity. But again, I'm agnostic because I can't say it's true.
Exactly.
So, but I'm not a
That's how
Christian. Don't consider myself that. But yeah, she went through a lot of hurt, and I was very unsympathetic many times with her. You know, she would be sharing her feelings. Her mom passed 2011, and she started hurting years later, and she would be crying, and I didn't know how to be sympathetic or support her. I was very uncomfortable trying to support her and make sense out of it. And I didn't understand why she was still crying about it and didn't get over it. Like, it just made me totally uncomfortable. Again, goes back to that environment I grew up under where sympathy wasn't a thing. My dad, mom didn't show much sympathy. You know, they really didn't. Or about people or whoever it was, and they were very negative. So sympathy wasn't a thing, and I learned sympathy more of showing it and expressing it probably within the last like 2 or 3 years. I really started to hear more, and then as I left kind of Christianity, you know, as a whole, Christianity, Apostle Paul's, right? Um, I started showing sympathy. I started expressing myself more. I started listening to my wife talk more and sympathizing more with her, and that's something I had to learn and teach myself, and took a long, long time because again, there was a lot of hurt stored up, you know, and yeah, it definitely affected me, you know, and obviously I've learned all this many, many, many years later, and um, yeah, it's just very interesting, you know.
Yeah.
But I see. So the way I got into Christianity was actually through on my own, was by being desperate. October 2006, I was pulled over for a DUI. Um, ever so happened, I've learned 10 years later that cop, he was a Christian. I met up with, and his wife used to pray that he would pull people over or something. And I don't know what the goal was of either getting people to know Christ or come to Christ. No clue. And he was a prick.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. So 2008, I decided I was going to try God. You know, nothing was going right in my life. Again, hurt, insecure, fear, depression, loneliness, afraid of the unknown after death, and not knowing what was true. And I was not very educated on just the basic things in life. I didn't know science. I didn't understand mental health. Again, my parents and Christians, some Christians, they believe psychology is evil. It's of the devil.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So they didn't believe that. My mom didn't believe in pills, like to help your mental health. Um, yeah, there's a lot there stored up, and then I think it was like 2009. I took ministry course like through the Assemblies of God, a local church, and what was interesting is they were all about money. Is they wanted me to pay for the course. It was like $1,000 each semester, and I didn't have the money. I was laid off from my job, and what made me really think was they were like desperate. I learned about 2 years later, just because I didn't finish paying up, which it was actually similar to God material, and they were teaching it in the church, which was probably way cheaper, right? If you just took it online compared to what they were um, charging you for them doing it in the church, because they're probably just making money off it. So I found they didn't even send in my transcript and stuff like that. After finishing, they never told me that because I didn't finish paying. Yeah.
And you'd think if you were a true Christian, you would just give them that. You would
Yeah.
just give them the course for free because you have compassion.
Yeah. And if you think people are literally dying and going to hell, right? If
Yeah.
that's really your belief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Don't make no sense.
No, a lot of stuff in Christianity, when you really, like I said, you start reading and seeing and knowing, and not of it don't make sense because it's just people. It gets cognitive dissonance. You ever hear that?
Cognitive dissonance. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
people saying one thing and they're always doing another, and that's what a lot of Christianity is. Maybe not so much with, again, Gospels. There's some good things there, but majority of Christianity as a whole, that's what it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. So then, then in 2010, they had an evangelist come, Dion Hockey, come to that church, about 1,500 people, and they preach a little bit of prosperity, money, give money, you'll be blessed. And there's this guy is from Africa, faith healer. He claimed to have healed somebody of cancer. But that guy never returned, which I thought was interesting. I was very skeptical even then. And then in 2012, I bought a book. Number one, I learned about the Clergy Project 3-4 years into Christianity, which there's a website, and it was Dane Barker, a former minister, started it up. And it's like an organization who helps ministers or stir in the pulpit preaching who no longer believe in a God. And they're looking for help in a community to help them get out of it and help them get themselves back on their feet. So I started learning that there's a lot of preachers, and I've learned now, even now, I interviewed some who stayed in the pulpit for years preaching as an atheist. So I thought this was interesting, the crack right there, because we've been told that don't touch the anointing, don't speak against God's people. And I'm thinking at the time, as a young Christian, meaning came into Christianity on my own, that didn't make much sense to me because what if they're not a Christian, and what if they're not God's anointing and they're atheists and they're just preaching and making up stuff just to get more money?
Yeah.
So there's a crack right there in Christianity. And I had on to that. And then I read a book about, I don't know if you ever heard of, James Randi.
Sounds really familiar.
Yeah, he's like a big skeptic. He passed away like 3 years ago in his 80s. He has a book out, The Faith Healers, where I think he's was an atheist, but he exposed a lot of these faith healers in the 1980s. He investigated them, sent his own team out, even sent his own people in the audience to fool them, and these faith healers, and their own people got picked, and they claimed this and this, and it wasn't even true. They just made it, so if God was speaking to this person, this evangelist, won't the information be correct?
Exactly. Yep.
So yeah, he really exposed a lot of them, the big names, and back then, and Peter Popoff. He learned Peter Popoff. He's the one that caught him with an earpiece and his wife talking to him. His ministry went down here then, but he came back. They always come back. I don't know if you learned that, right?
Yep, they do.
Yeah, they got knocked down for a couple of years, or
they pop back up. Yep.
Yeah. And now I think if it was him or somebody, he's aiming towards the black people.
Yep.
I mean, when you are even sexual scandals, they always in back in ministry. They repented, and God came to them again, and
Yep.
So you can't stop these people over and over and over. They end up somewhere. And it was a good book, and I've even learned about what's his name, Marshall Goetner, again something. He was where he came about, age 4 years old in 1948, his parents had him preaching at 4 years old. His parents were evangelists back then, and they used him obviously to bring money. They would teach him sermons and what to say, um, when to say amen, when to collect the money, like from the congregation. He was 4 years old. There was no age limit where you could be a minister at the time. Now there is. And you could find it on newspaper.com, as I did. But he did that as a young kid, and they used him for money. And then teenage years, he lived with a girl, came back in the ministry, early 20s in the 1970s, and he decided to expose himself in all the tricks and schemes and all that, and the faith healing business and ministry. And so he did a documentary, which I have, and some of it's on YouTube you could find. And he basically shared that you need a good gimmick, you need this, you need that, to get these churches to invite you back, to show interest in you, and money and stuff like that. And he said if you go on the radio back then, or you're saying from 1970s examples, because that's when he was doing the documentary, you go on the radio and say, the Lord told me there's a little old lady with $10 in the cookie jar. Well, back then, he said, well, there was a lot of people that had money in cookie jars back then, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you could get 4,000 people listening to that station, and they think the Lord's speaking to them to give their $10.
Yep, when in fact it's just bound to happen because people were keeping their stuff in the cookie jars back then.
Yeah, and they still do the same crap today. These evangelists and pastors, same gimmicks, and I've seen it. Even local people I know that claim to be, God speaking to them. One guy I know personally for years, he's a pastor, and it's never ending. And so yeah, he exposed that. So back then, I thought that was interesting. So throughout, then I got a book from Tim Warner Wallace, which he was trying to prove that the Bible was liable, and I stuck with that for 10 years. I only really stuck with the Gospels because I seen them as eyewitness testimonies. And they are ironic. Was last winter I did an online course, like only 3 people joined, to prove that the Bible was reliable. And halfway through that, actually, I remember a thought came to me thinking, this guy's talking about Dead Sea Scrolls. But the only thing I know is what he was telling me about it. I never looked at it myself. So I did buy English version of Dead Sea Scrolls from the Old Testament. It was like November, and then James Tarver, whatever his name is an expert on it, the religious scholar. And I listened to his course, like online. He had a course, and I've learned some things where, what's some of the scriptures in there are way different than some of the scriptures in our modern day versions. So it wasn't what things seem to be and what they're teaching. And so all this holes and things I started seeing, I think I started deconstruct Christianity back in 2012. I just didn't have the balls, basically, and enough evidence to kind of leave it. Because again, I was in this corner was, what if there's a hell? I don't know. I'm told there's a hell. It could burn forever. So you kind of just followed along. Then once I debunked the hell theory, which is called universalism, Christianity, which it really is good evidence to believe that there is no eternal hell. And the way that goes about within Christianity is actually the early church didn't believe in an eternal hell. They believed more of a purgatory. And then the Bible, the word hell was, I think, put together, I think, with different words or something came to one. I can't remember exactly how it came about. But even what Jesus was speaking of to the Jewish people back then, again, going by the scriptures, he was talking about Gehenna. Gehenna was a fire pit outside Jerusalem back then that they would sacrifice kids, throw in. It just kept on burning and burning and burning. Garbage, dead dogs, whatever. It was just a big fire pit, which is still there today, but I think it's something else there. So when you research the ancient texts in Greek and everything people know, the experts, it was referring to that. Jesus wasn't talking about literal hell. And that would make more sense, actually, because he was relating to that what they knew. I'm sure they killed people and probably threw them in there too.
Yeah.
They had no respect for humans in that culture, some of them. And so once I debunked the hell theory, which is called universalist Christianity, which I would hold on to more, that everybody, if there is a heaven, everybody would eventually work their way up to heaven if there is, right? And that makes more sense because, again, when you learn about even back in the Old Testament, there is no hell. There was just Hades, where everybody went to the same place, shadowy place. And I work at a Jewish boarding school, believe it or not. It's not like the schools you're talking about. There's some weird things that go on there, but it's not even close. They're just weird sometimes. But so I've learned things about Jewish traditions and beliefs, and I've asked questions. And yeah, so there was no literal hell in the Old Testament. So how did suddenly this Jesus character shows up, right? There was no literal hell, and so God just said, you know what? I have Jesus here now. I'm going to create a literal hell where people could burn forever if they don't believe in me. So you sent Jesus to save people from their sins, right? If Jesus didn't come, that's what's taught in Christianity, then we're all going to hell. But there was no hell before Jesus came on the scene.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you know that? Yeah. Yeah, it's quite interesting. And then you learn it was a couple hundred years later in history. I think Augustine or somebody, they created the hell theory and somewhere in the doctrine of Christianity.
Yeah.
And then the early church, again, not based on the Bible alone, they was more universal. They believed everybody eventually make it to heaven. And there was no Bibles around then. The Bible was not put together until around 325 AD with Constantine and the Catholic Church in Rome. They gathered all the books. They voted on which books to include. So more and more you think and you learn. And as I know now, it's Christianity today, in modern day Christianity, is not even close to telling people the truth. And it's more about the money, it's more about the control, and it's more about I don't know what the theories is. But as you learn back, if you want to stick to the facts, most Christians don't even know the facts.
Yeah. They don't even know they don't even know the religion they're actually like following.
Yeah, they don't.
They don't.
No, they don't, and they don't. Even my twin sister debate, like they're just basically indoctrinated by their pastors, who I've learned later. I learned a couple months ago from other, I think it was other former pastors or something. But if somebody goes to like a seminar, what's it called, seminary or whatever, and a good one, they're actually taught that they're actually taught the real like the Bible and how it's put together and how some of the authors, you have no clue who the authors is, like basically the real truth, about the Bible. But these pastors hide it from the congregation because if they actually share that stuff, then you're not going to have anybody coming to your church.
Yeah, exactly.
So I always loved history, so that's why I love, I'm not saying the Bible is history, but it kind of is ancient things. And so yeah, that's what I've learned, and what really got to me and where I started to actually kind of depart from the modern day Christianity, or just Christianity because Apostle Paul founded it, his versions, was at the time I had a friend I became friends with a girl who actually was gay. She's lesbian, and she's, great girl. And I was always curious to learn about the LGBT community. So it was like last January, at work, I just started listening to people who were Christians who struggled with same-sex attraction. story after story after story and trying to make sense out of it. Because at the time, I thought people could change, right? Because that's what you're taught. And then growing up in the household I grew up in, again, the environment, you're almost taught homosexuality is the worst sin. God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So hate is kind of taught, and it has nothing to do with Scripture. So that kind of bugged me as I'm listening. I'm like, okay, people can change. Then I learned from, what's her name? Kathy Baldock or something her name is. She had a video on YouTube, and she shared the history of the kind of sex and Christianity, how it involved in back at the time of, the New Testament days and this and this and this. So I really started realizing, wait a minute, these people can change. And then I learned about how there in our Bibles, it's in the New Revised Version in 1946, the word homosexual got put in there, direct word. And then I learned that over in German, the class there's a Bible from the 1800s in Germany or whatever, that said boy molesters won't inherit heaven. So I learned later on, it's almost from a guy that's now an atheist. He was a pastor for 20 years. It's almost same shit or something he said when you play with words. But the point is, it is, but then it isn't. Because this guy doesn't even believe anymore. Because this big theory, boy molester or homosexuals, it's kind of different, right? So I bought that Bible in May, and I read it for the evidence. I spent $55 on eBay, and that's when I realized this is bullshit. My siblings hate homosexuals. They claim they don't. They always claim, oh, I have a friend. Oh, I know a homosexual, but they go to hell directly. Don't pass go. Don't ask for forgiveness. You're gay. You're going straight to hell. Jesus didn't die for you, and that's the message that's commonly taught, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, that kind of shook me up, and that's when I started actually deconstructing my faith. And then it just was a lot of hurt built up there, a lot of hurt, a lot of anger, and I started realizing what I was taught and believed, the majority of things I was taught and believed, isn't even really true, not even biblically. And as I learned even more recently, I was taught almost a lie, and because again, Apostle Paul contradicts Jesus. If you're following a leader, one of you be following the person who claims to be God, the person who's given the words of wisdom, which would be Jesus in the Gospels. If you believe someone believes that, not some other person that comes on the scene and says, yeah, I know Jesus, and so it's telling you things that is contradicting what this God figure has said. So yeah, that's where I started deconstructing my faith after learning that, and the hate on the LGBT community, which I learned that I started supporting them a lot, and I was accused of being gay too, by my siblings. Oh, when are you gonna come? No, you're the one that hates them, and you're the ones that hate them. Vote in crooked politicians who are against these people, but yet you support people who lie, who the Bible says abomination too.
Yep.
So yeah, it just was something, became passionate about it because I just seen America and Christianity as a whole was so against this minority group. And I realized this is ridiculous. This is not the truth. Because if you believe in this Jesus figure, well, he died for everybody's sins. Not if you're gay and you still have same-sex attraction, you can't go to heaven, even if you believe in Jesus. Because that's almost what's being taught.
Yep.
So there's a lot of lies out there, and I was going back and forth with my twin sister online, and they're dumb. Yep. They're drinking juice from the pastor, what they want to tell you. And then they spin things, you know why? Because if they actually believe some of the things in the Gospels, they'll probably be in hell. They would, because Jesus said, help the poor, visit the prisoner, take care of the sick. And if you're not doing these things, he said you're going to go to hell, basically. The hell they're created now. I don't believe there's a hell, but coming from the modern day Christianity, they believe in a hell. And that's the verse they're taking in the Bible, it says hell. So that's why I'm saying that. So so crazy, but it's so much peace behind it when you leave kind of religion. You leave this controlling environment, this toxic environment, this lie that came from Apostle Paul, and modern day Christianity, which you learn that in other countries, Christianity is different. In America, it's all about money Christianity, and I could preach all day long, you know. But where freedom comes is me changing, me leaving the faith, as because everything I grew up under and seen and heard, it shaped me. I was hateful. I was bitter. I wasn't very nice to people. I was judgmental, very judgmental. If you weren't a Christian, you know, I may not like you, or I would favor Christian athletes more, and they become my favorite, but it's just because they were Christian. And I was not very nice from the non-Christians, or even the politicians. Oh, they're Christian. We think we go support them, we vote for them, rather than looking at the type of person somebody is and their character and the policies that's good for humanity and us, that could help us and help the poor and needy and all that. And how ironic is when you look at the Republican Party and some of their policies, they claim to know Jesus, but again, they only know Apostle Paul, not the Jesus of the Scriptures, because Jesus of the Scriptures is about helping the poor. Jesus didn't call them freeloaders. He didn't call them games or lazy.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
This is probably the truth of the gospel that any Christian in America is going to hear. You're not gonna hear this in your church.
Definitely not.
No, and it's, you know, they're not. He was about the poor, the needy. He wasn't for the rich. Said if you have money, help the poor. Do this. And then you look at the Democrat Party; they line more up with that. Some of their policies you learn,
Oh, yeah.
and you learn the Republican Party is for the rich, the corporation more, the power, the control, and then you can't be gay, and you can't have an abortion. But then you go back to the Old Testament. The guy of the Old Testament was always killing people. Just, you know,
Yeah.
Noah's Ark.
Yeah. It's fucking ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. And then they act like, oh, God would never be forced abortion. Well, you go to a verse in Leviticus, I think, is a Deuteronomy. I can't remember what it is. There's actually scriptures that God basically cursed somebody, and had some priest or rabbi, somebody went up, I can't remember the story, but basically formed a miscarriage
Wow.
and cut something in the stomach or did something and pulled the baby out.
Wow.
And he showed us how to do it.
Wow.
I don't know if you knew that, and most Christians don't. I didn't know that. Till I started listening to people who left Christianity, former pastors, that a lot of this stuff is in there.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. But yeah, so it's just so interesting, and again, a lot of this, I even learned about the slavery. Do you know the slavery story? Christians supported slaves.
Oh, yeah.
Like I have
Yeah.
slaves.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, they supported it. They used the Bible, which now I know the Bible, maybe not Jesus again, not this Jesus character, not in the Gospels, but Apostle Paul again talks about what? Submitting to your masters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Getting control, submitting, power, and then the Old Testament they had slaves. So
Yeah.
that was Christianity combined. Again, not this Jesus character wasn't for slavery, but Apostle Paul basically was. So not only did Christians support slavery, the Southern Baptist Convention, I've learned, and it's a historical fact, it started to basically fight and help Christians keep their slaves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a shit show, honestly.
Mm-hmm. And then we want to ignore the history and pretend it was just a mistake, a misunderstanding, which the same stuff is being repeated today in other ways. In the LGBT community, same thing. It's going to continue. And it's just nothing new, like the Bible would say, nothing new underneath the sun. And then you go back that there was a bunch of white Christian men went throughout America for about 300 years, killing Indians in the name of God because they believed
Yep.
God gave them this land.
Yep. It's disgusting.
It is.
It really
And I
is.
read a book on that. And not only that, they were slaughtering babies of those
Yep.
that wouldn't leave.
Infanticide was fucking huge. Yep.
Yeah, moms, dads, and there were some of them were quoting scriptures while we're doing it.
Yep.
So, you know, when you look back at the history of Christianity and the Crusades and this and this and this, and then we look at the American Christianity today, it's been painted. It's like painting a picture. Oh, we're going to take this, we're going to do that, we're going to make the reputation, like basically build a reputation. We're going to make it look like this lovey-dovey Christianity, the sweet Jesus and the sweet Christian, sugar and spice, and put it in a box and say, this is Christianity. You know, it's not what this of all the evil they did, all the killing they did. So it's almost like it's like a sales tactic of making Christianity look attractive and all loving.
Exactly.
Yeah, and kind and this, and paint the picture of it and try to get followers and forget the history and all the killing and murder. John Calvin even had people killed. He was a theologian, can't even say it, back in the 1500s, who had people killed who believed different than him. And he had his own theology, and it's in America. And I have his book. And he actually said God is author of sin. And like he went on, I bought his book. I never read it. I bought it just to have it when I heard about it, in case in future I want to use it as a reference and show somebody. So, but yet they follow Calvinism in America. You learn about Pentecostal church, 1900s, 1901. The Assemblies of God that came out of this movement. You learn about when the Baptist was invented. I think it was 1600 Baptist church, Methodist church. You learn about the Protestantism. Like it was all made movements, you know. And I'm just going off, if you don't mind, you know.
You're fine.
And it was all made, right? And then I heard something today. My wife laughed at this. All these claimed founders, and there's probably almost over 30,000 different Christian denominations in America, not America, across the world. A lot of them claim that God spoke to them. They're the one true Christian branch, right?
Yep.
So how does this God speak to you, but there's hundreds of others that claim God spoke to them, and they have a different doctrine, a different beliefs.
Yeah.
Is this God confused?
Yeah. It don't make no sense. Really don't make no sense, dude.
And it doesn't. And most people don't sit back and think, wait a minute, you know. So and then you got God never changes. Well, I think he changes every minute, every second, depending on who's speaking about him.
Yeah, he does. He does. He does.
So yeah, eventually, yeah, I learned all this stuff, and eventually I kind of left Christianity. I didn't know what I believed, and now I just if I made anything, I believe in universal Christianity. That if there is a God, there's a heaven. Eventually, everybody make the way there, and you know that's what I believe now. And I don't believe in a literal hell. And again, I'm an agnostic more because we don't have proof. We won't know until we're dead. But there definitely was a lot of freedom once I've learned the real historical truth and researching history of Christianity, the church, and everything people didn't want to do, and it was part of my life. All this growing up and in the church, I've learned that there's a lot of I think it's ideologies they call it. I can't remember.
Ideologies.
Yeah. I learned that word from a former. I think it was a former pastor or rapper, Christian rapper that's now an atheist. I interviewed him. Basically, yeah, where it's just assumptions, opinions, things made up, statements said that isn't even biblical and doesn't even like come close to anything in Scripture. And I've learned throughout my entire Christian, I would say, walk when I became Christian on my own, that I believed a lot of lies, basically things that really didn't have historical facts behind it, scientifically. They're the facts scientifically, and it wasn't even really Scripture. There's so many things said by preachers and made up and assumptions that's really not even based on Scripture. It's just a lot of gaslighting is done in Christianity, lots of it. Anytime you challenge something, they make some excuse up or make something to shut you up.
Yeah. Yep. They don't like to be told that they don't know what they're talking about either.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, there's a lot of them out there, But religion has hurt a lot of people. Like that's what my podcast. A lot of traumas. There's people that's been molested by pastors. That's rampant.
Yeah.
Freaking one dude, I had him on my podcast. James Hinton. He's a pastor of a church in Pittsburgh area in Pennsylvania. His dad was molesting his sisters many years ago, like several years ago. His sisters came out around 2011, told him, two of his sisters or something. I think it was one or two. I can't remember. He looked into it and he believed his sister. So him and his mom actually turned into his dad. And he was a pastor for 30, 40 years or something at the church. And they learned later, like he admitted to molesting 30 kids. And then the police, after researching and investigating and this, they think he molested over 200 kids.
Oh yeah, I don't doubt it.
And there's many just like him.
Mm-hmm.
I did a lot of research on those people and predators. And what he used to do is he would actually volunteer to watch like parents' kids or whatever in their church, babysit them.
Mm-hmm.
And they thought he was just being nice, Christ-like. But, it's disgusting.
Really is. What's your podcast?
So,
What's your podcast called?
Agape Freedom podcast.
Okay.
So yeah, that's my story.
Okay.
If you have any questions.
Well, I know exactly what you're talking about, so I don't really have that many questions about it.
Yeah.
I just know that I know exactly what you're talking about. There's a lot of just like hypocrisy and just, people don't even know what religion they are, representing. They really don't. They really don't. There's a lot of convolution. There's a lot of people taking. See what happens is everybody reads the Bible and interprets it their own way, right? So all it takes is one person reading the Bible, interpreting it in a different way than it's already been interpreted to create a new religion. Because they just take that and they're like, okay, here's my interpretation. This is actually what's right. So join my religion. And this is what all these different religions do is they just think, no, our way is the right way. Our beliefs are the right. When it's just like there's no evidence for that. None of it. So like with the Bible, turn the other cheek, treat others how you want to be treated. Those are basically essentially what the Bible is saying.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, the gospel.
Literally in a nutshell.
Yeah, love your neighbor and love God. Actually, was the two greatest commandments. Love your neighbor as yourself, I believe, and it's in the Gospels. If somebody believes in that and what basic Christianity really is, and stuff like that, it's interesting. So, but yeah, thank you for having me on here.
Yeah, no problem. And I also want to recommend. There's a YouTube channel called Zen Lauren. You should look into him. He's very good. He's been researching this. He used to be a Christian too as well, and then he got out of it and deprogrammed. And he just trust me, you would like him. He talks about a lot of the same hypocrisy and stuff that you talk about, and expose. That's his job is to expose cults and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, definitely look into it. What's his name now?
I'll text it. I'll send it in the chat because I want to make sure that you have it.
Yeah.
Hold on, I'll do it right now. Right there.
All right, cool.
Yep, and he's awesome. And I would recommend that. And then thank you so much for coming on the show. I think it's actually think it's important to get this take on it because I haven't had a person come on and talk about the hypocrisy of religion yet. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm glad I was able to share it and get it out there, and I hope it helps people, whatever situation they are, or if went through boarding school that were Christian or religious, or even just growing up, that they actually could listen to this and hear the real truth. You know, if they still hold on to Christianity and is confused and stuff like that. So, but yeah,
All right.
yeah, thank you. I'm glad, you know, I was able to put this out there.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And maybe we can do a part 2 too. If you like, if you just like take some notes and just like find like some key points you want to touch on, and we can do a
Yeah.
part 2 too. So.
Yeah, definitely, we could do that.
All right.
So
Cool.
thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. If you guys have liked the video or watched the video so far, please make sure you like the video, share it, drop a comment down below. It really helps the algorithm, and subscribe if you're not already. And we will catch you on the next one. Peace out, guys.